All right, welcome back to the show, everyone. Today we have Seth Bradley on the show. Seth is a real estate entrepreneur and an expert in creating passive income while working a highly paid professional career. In his career, he's been part of billions with a B dollars of real estate transactions as a real estate attorney, investor, and a broker. In his spare time, he is also the host of a passive income attorney podcast where he focuses on educating attorneys and other highly paid professionals on how to stop trading their time for money so that they can practice when they want, not because they have to. There's a lot that we can learn from this man, so I'll just stop right there. And with that, Seth, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Matt. Really appreciate you having me on, and thanks for the intro, man.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we like to start with the difficult questions here. What's your favorite ice cream?
Oh man, I kind of like just the Oreo ice cream. You know, a lot of vanilla, then just a little bit of chocolate crunch in there. I'm down with that.
Okay. From McDonald's, or do you have a place that you like it from?
I don't have a specific place now.
Yeah,
It's usually good from anywhere.
All right. Well, you answered the question that we typically have that's controversial, whether you like toppings or no toppings. Do you put anything else besides Oreos or?
No, not typically, but I mean, if I go to like a frozen yogurt place or something like that, I mean, you got to put all kinds of stuff on there. So
Yeah, they trick you with the weight. You get a small cup, but then at the end
they
of it,
do.
you've got like 2 pounds of ice cream.
Yeah, I was just there last week with my wife, and she loves ice cream. I don't really love it that much, but I take her because she loves it, and it's just like, and I end up with one that's like a pound heavier than hers, and it's just ridiculous. They get you
Yeah.
with some of that stuff.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that's probably why you bought the gym franchise, which I want to get into, is
Yeah,
because if you're like me, you work out just so you can eat good things. But
yeah,
tell,
for sure.
tell our listeners, what's the scoop? What do you do today?
What do I do today? Well, I'm a real estate investor, man. I mean, I'm still a real estate attorney as well. I mean, it served me well getting into real estate, being a real estate attorney, kind of seeing the deals, the big deals, $100 million plus, financings and closings and things like that, from multiple angles, from seeing it from the buyer, seeing it from a seller, seeing it from, the service provider attorney position, and also as a broker and seeing it from that side of the table as well. So, I've transitioned now to almost full-time real estate investor. I mean, I could technically be, but I still bill about 10 hours a week with one major client that I just do a lot of work for. And it's just like, it's real estate related, and they're all like business real estate guys that I work with. So it's fun.
You're the first person I've ever met that's an attorney on your side hustle.
Yeah. Yeah. It's flipped over the last
Yeah.
couple of years. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. So tell our listeners where your real estate journey began. What was your first deal? Where'd you get started?
yeah, it was, I think it's pretty typical, man. I mean, I started listening to Bigger Pockets, the Bigger Pockets podcast. Everybody always starts there and, gets into the residential stuff. And you just start thinking about, oh, how do I get my first deal? And as soon as I got my first law job in 2013, I house hacked into a duplex. I lived in one half, rented out the other, and I basically paid nothing. Luckily, my wife was willing to do that with me. I know some folks aren't quite as flexible, but house hacking is the easiest, cheapest way to get into a property because you can get a great mortgage on it. You don't have to pay much out of pocket, and eventually you can move out and it'll be a great long-term rental. And I still own that property today.
Yeah, where is that? Is that in Scottsdale or?
No, that's in Morgantown, West Virginia, which is
Okay.
just outside of where I grew up. So it's a college town. There's a big school there, about 30,000 kids, and it's over by the football stadium. It's a great little rental.
Do you have anything else in the Morgantown area?
I don't, because it's one of those places that, I know it well. Obviously, I grew up there, but it just, there's nothing there except for the school, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you want to get into student housing, it's a nice little submarket. But other than that, it's just, you're not going to get any appreciation. I mean, that house is worth just about as much as when I bought it, but it does cash flow. So,
Yeah. How's your experience been from a student rental? Have you had trouble with the tenants there or not?
I haven't personally with that rental because it's on the other side of town. So it's like on the kind of the medical, all the graduate schools are on that side of town with the football stadium. And then on the other side of town is like the downtown campus with all the undergrads. So I haven't had any experience with the undergrads. Luckily, it's all been grad students and professionals. There's a couple of big hospitals over there. So I've had folks like that come through. So no issues, but given my experience, I went to WVU. I don't know how much I'd want to deal with student housing in the downtown campus because I know we were pretty tough on houses when we were in college.
I guess the main question that's burning on everyone's mind right now that knows West Virginia is how many couches did you burn in your tenure there?
Oh man, I shouldn't disclose that. I burned a couple of couches. I'm not gonna lie. I had a good time in college.
Yeah, I went to the University of Tennessee, and we beat Memphis in basketball when I was there, and we were transitioning from a football school to a basketball school. And I
Yeah.
remember our fraternity was watching at the house, and we pulled one out and we burned it in homage to West Virginia because that's what you guys do up there. But that's a pretty cool tradition.
Yeah, I remember when they came through, they had a city ordinance. They stopped letting you have furniture on your porch. You weren't
Yeah.
allowed to have furniture on your porch for a certain amount of time there for a while. I don't know if they still have that ordinance or not. And then people just started having dumpster fires. So they would roll the metal dumpsters out in the middle of the street and light those on fire instead because they
Wow.
couldn't do the furniture. It's
Interesting.
ridiculous.
Interesting.
Win or lose.
Yeah, win or lose, couches are being burned.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, hey, wait a minute, that's a lot of lumber.
Yeah. Right. You can take that apart and sell it now.
Yeah, yeah. So after Morgantown, I understand you went to law school there, right?
No, so I went to med school at WVU for a little bit, about a
Okay.
year and a couple of weeks, and I dropped out because I hated it and wasn't looking forward to that. And I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Then I ended up getting my MBA at Arizona State, followed by law school at the University of San Diego.
Okay. Okay. So where did your portfolio go from there? When we were doing all the transitions there, what did you do next?
Yeah, well, the easy thing is when I kept getting different jobs. So I moved to Charlotte, I house hacked again. When I moved to the West Coast, I house hacked again. So I picked up properties just that way, just because it was an easy, cheap way to get things. But along that journey, I also did fix and flips and wholesales and picked up different smaller rentals as I went. Ended up investing in Cleveland, which is not, the best market, but it is a good market for cash flow, and you can get into properties really cheap. And, I actually still invest there because we have a team built out. We have a contractor team, a property manager that's in-house and all that kind of stuff. So it's easy to take down properties there. So just kind of scaled up from there, starting getting into some smaller multifamilies. Eventually wanted to make the jump into larger multifamilies, because like I said, when I was working in big law, I was seeing like all these big deals getting closed. And I'm like, man, I want to be on the equity side. How do I do that? And it's one of those mindset shifts, right? Even though I was, working for these guys and on the service side, trying to get to the point where you're like, okay, well, I'm buying fourplexes, to how do I buy a 150 unit apartment complex? It's a mind shift. So I did eventually get over that. And, I started exploring how to go about it. And, people were saying, well, maybe you should invest passively in a syndication first. And that's really what I did. So I started investing passively in syndications, did a handful of those. And then I started investing on the active side.
So you basically saw multifamily or bigger properties because you were working in that and wanted to get involved in that. When you were doing your wholesales and fix and flips in Cleveland, how did you manage that from California?
Difficult. It's very difficult.
Yeah.
It's still difficult. I mean, the issue with the residential stuff, and especially while you're working, a really busy 9 to 5 W-2 job, is you just don't have the time, right? You don't have the time. You don't have the freedom to be able to deal with these property managers and contractors that are 2,000 miles away. It's hard enough to fix and flip an old house in your local market where you can drive by it next door to see if the contractor's doing what they're supposed to do and the work is up to par and all that kind of stuff. If you're 2,000 miles away, you've got to take somebody else's word for it, whether it's a friend that's watching it over for you, if you've got a property manager that's overlooking the contractor, or trying to trust the contractor himself, which never works out. It's just very difficult to manage those projects from afar. And it's hard to scale. I mean, those are the two things. I mean, it's hard to have enough time while you're working the 9 to 5 job, and it's hard to scale. I mean, those are the two big things with residential properties that, are difficult to overcome.
Yeah, and I know that from my experience too, at a certain stage in your residential, you're going to reach limits where traditional banks don't want to lend to you anymore, whether your DTI ratios are out of whack or they've sold off all their loans to Fannie and Freddie. So you now have to go to credit unions and smaller local banks and things like that. If you were to do it all over again and you're Seth Bradley and you just got your high paying attorney job and you wanted to invest in real estate, would you venture down the residential market at all, or would you have just jumped straight into passive income through syndications?
I would probably just go straight into passive syndications. I mean, at least explore that first. See if you can start buying back your time piece by piece. That's usually what I tell these folks. Because I was in their shoes. If you're making a lot of money, whether you're a tech professional or a lawyer, a doctor, whatever it might be, if you have a really good W-2 job and you're making a lot of money, and you're not, extraordinarily unhappy with your career, like you're not just hating your life, the best way to do it is just take that active income and turn that into passive income. And the best first step is to invest passively in a syndication. Those are those big commercial big commercial deals that you can get involved in, where you're not dealing with, fix and flip contractors and property managers. You're dealing with professionals, higher grade vendors, people like that are gonna, they care about their work, they care about their reputation, and they stay on time and stay on budget. And it's, it's a whole different ballgame. And then, from there, once you start buying back your time, which is the big constraining issue, then maybe look into getting the active side if that's what you want to do. And if not, if you love your career, if you enjoy what you do, then just continue doing that. And then you can buy back your time piece by piece. And eventually, if you want to walk away, you can.
Yeah, there's two general rules I would pull out of there. I tend to agree with you. One is there's a lot of cool things you can do as a high paid professional or accredited investor around credit lines and velocity banking and how you can go accelerate your passive income streams and things like that. But to do those things, you need good streams of income coming in on the back end. And if you're a trained doctor, lawyer, sales professional, or something like that, don't stop the golden goose. Like keep that golden goose coming and then venture into that. And the second thing is, in my market in Nashville, man, contractors are really, really hard to find. Good ones are even harder to find. And you want to know why? It's because look at all the buildings going up downtown. Like if I'm a contractor and I can work for Matt for 20 hours spotty every now and then, or I can work 40 to 50 to 60 hours a week building a skyscraper downtown and it's consistent, probably going to go do that.
Right. Right. And exactly. And you end up taking on contractors that aren't the best. And a lot of times when you get started too, you always look for the cheapest option too. I mean, when you first start, you're like, well, how can I make this work? You get 3 bids and you just take the cheapest one because it's the cheapest. That's a mistake. And it ends up costing you more in the long run. So contractors are the hardest part. And especially when you're dealing with residential guys instead of the commercial guys, it's just a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, 100%. So I went through this transition over the past year of placing some private capital and PPMs and as limited partners and things like that. How did you overcome the hurdle of how do I know this person's not just going to take my money and run and I'll never see them again? Like what could you tell someone that's going through that right now? They know they want to get involved in real estate. They're trying to place limited capital or limited partner capital, but they really can't get over that hurdle.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, the first time you send that $50,000 wire to somebody, it's nerve wracking. I don't care how much money you have. I mean, you're literally sending a $50K wire to somebody that you probably know a little bit, but don't know them personally. And it's a little nerve wracking the first time. But, it comes down to just vetting that sponsor, vetting, if it's a capital raiser or a sponsor, direct sponsor, whoever it might be, just getting to know that person, looking them up, Google searching them. Find them on LinkedIn, find them on social media, see if they're legit, see if they've got the track record, the experience, they've done this thing before. Just make sure they're legit, because there's a lot of people out there that, are trying to do this similar thing that we're doing, Matt, and, they're not legit. They haven't done it before and they're just getting started. I mean, you've just got to do your research, do your due diligence. It's a pretty small community here in the multifamily space and everybody knows everybody. So reputation it travels fast. I mean, everybody knows, who the good sponsors are, who's not, who's kind of lost money for their investors, who hasn't, who's had to do capital calls. I mean, if you just start networking, asking questions, and just looking out for yourself by, looking them up and vetting them, I think you can do a pretty fair job at least, putting yourself in the best position possible.
Yeah, I tend to go by the rule of thumb too. Like it's easy to front over 1 or 2 conversations. It's really hard to front who you are over the course of a relationship. So I get people all the time where I connect with them and then we have a call and then we have a follow-up call and then they'll send me a deal. And I always pass on the first deal because that will tell you if you say no to someone on their first deal and they're still willing to be engaged with you, they're not after the money. They're after just building that longer term relationship. And ultimately, I mean, the people that I invest with, like I know their houses at this time. And it's not to say that a deal can't go sour or that they can't go off and run, but I feel a lot more comfortable knowing that I've spent a significant amount of time with them now than just one call and here's your money kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, things go wrong. There are bad deals from good sponsors. I mean, sometimes things just go right. I mean, things come up that you can't account for, and there's nothing wrong with that. And it's just better when you talk to these folks over and over again and just make sure they're transparent and they're not trying to cover something up. I mean, if they're open and honest about, oh, well, we weren't able to, give this distribution in summer of 2020 because of COVID, because we felt it was the best time. It was in the best. It was better for our investors to keep that cash, so we don't have to do a capital call later. That's fine. As long as they're open and honest and transparent about what's going on.
Yeah, Brian Burke did the book, The Hands-Off Passive Investor. It's one of the best books out there, I think, from a syndication standpoint, not only from like an experienced person, but if you don't know anything, he does a good job. And if you know a lot, I think he does a good job. And I listened to him on an interview one time talking about that a family office called him. And a family office is the offices that raise money and manage money for the extremely wealthy, the Bill Gates, the Jeff Bezos of the world, and people like that. And they connected with him and they said, okay, well, we're going to watch you for the next couple of years to see what you do. And then we'll decide if we're going to invest with you or not. And that just shows you the long game that these guys play out there that are investing a lot of money. It's okay for you to take a couple of months if they can take a couple of years. So we kind of breezed by it. I want to dig deep into like, what is a syndication? And then you've got 5 things that you look for in a syndication or things to know about the deal as a whole. So first of all, like, what is a syndication? If I'm out there and I don't know what that is, what is a syndication?
Yeah, and it's funny because we get in this loop of LinkedIn and all this stuff, and we just assume everybody knows what a syndication is. But most people, even investors that call me or call you, they're just like, what is it? What is this syndication thing? I mean, to put it simply, it's just a bunch of people getting together and pooling their money to take down an asset they couldn't do on their own. Whether that takes more capital or more expertise, or the ability to lend to take down one of these properties. Is basically a group of people just pulling their capital, pulling their skills, pulling everything together in order to take down a larger property. And typically it's going to be, you're going to have your active side and your passive side. Active side are the folks that are going to be running the deal and executing the business plan. The passive side are generally going to be the folks that bring in the equity capital.
Yeah, I like that. Pulling together resources is the best way I describe it, right? So you're a former real estate attorney, also a practicing real estate attorney today. You've got a certain skill set that I might not have. So, hey, maybe Seth and I partner together on something because we have different skill sets. And by the way, we need additional capital because maybe we don't have all the capital to take down a $50 million deal. And that's where limited partners come in and things like that. There are really 2 different types of funds when I look at syndications. There's 506Bs and 506Cs. Can you help our listeners kind of understand the difference if someone's saying I've got a 506B fund versus a 506C fund?
Yeah, sure. I mean, a lot of folks are like, they hear this term accredited investor and they're asking themselves, am I accredited? One, and B, if I'm not accredited, can I still invest in these types of deals? 506B, I like to say that it stands for buddy. So, if you're a syndicator and you're raising capital for your deals, the B stands for buddy because you need to raise it from your buddies, your friends, your family, people that you know that you already have a significant, substantial pre-existing relationship with. So you're not allowed to advertise or solicit or get on Facebook and say, here, I've got a property. I need some capital for this. Will you guys invest with me? It's got to be people you already have a relationship with. Those types of deals, you actually don't have to be accredited to invest. So those are the deals, if you get to know the sponsors beforehand, before they have a deal, establish that relationship with them, you don't necessarily need to be accredited in order to invest. So you don't. So the answer is no, you don't have to be accredited to invest, but it has to be the right type of deal. And it's usually in the form of a 506B deal. 506C deal is a little bit different because you are allowed to advertise, you are allowed to solicit. These are the deals that you see on Facebook and Facebook groups and people posting their deals on LinkedIn like, hey, I have this deal, passive investors, if you're interested, hit me up. Those types of deals are 506C deals, and you have to be accredited, meaning you had to make at least $200,000 over the last couple of years with the reasonable expectation of the same, or have a net worth of $1 million or more, not including your primary residence.
Okay. And if I'm an investor in a 506B or a 506C, is there any real difference in returns or anything like that for me?
Uh, with return profile, no, not necessarily.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're out there listening and somebody says, I've got a B fund versus a C fund, just know it's more important for the general operators and how they operate, how they go out and find the capital, not necessarily to you as the investor.
Yeah.
You've got your 5 things that you look for in a syndication. So I kind of want us to run through that. What is the first one?
Yeah, sure. I mean, these are the things, I mean, you need to know everything about kind of your operating agreement, which is the operating document behind your investment. It's going to tell you everything you need to know about your waterfall and your returns and, who gets what, who gets paid first, all that kind of stuff. And this can go for, the syndicators, the active investors, as well as the passive investors. You need to know everything about this operating agreement. And as boring as it might be, you need to read the thing from front to back whenever you invest in it, or even when you're the active operator. I know a lot of these folks are us. We don't even want to read it either, but you have to read it. You have to know it, whether that's because you're investing in the deal and you need to know your rights and responsibilities, or if you're on the active side and your passive investors are, maybe they're attorneys and they read it and they ask you some specific questions about it. You need to be able to answer in a sophisticated manner. So, the number one thing you need to know, and a lot of people ask about, is the capital call. People, those are 2 dirty words that we hope to never have to deal with in practice. And typically it's the last resort. It's when, there's a cash flow shortage and you can't find any other way to get capital. And to keep the deal running, you have to ask the passive investors for more money. And, we don't want to do that. You don't see it very often, but, you need to know your rights within that operating agreement and see if it's mandatory, or if it's, at the discretion of the manager, or if it's up to a vote of, all the members of the LLC. Just know your rights. I mean, you're not going to be able, unless you're coming in as like, a huge investor, like let's say it's $1 million raise and you're coming in with all $1 million for the equity, you're not going to be able to negotiate this term or a lot of the terms, but you just need to know your rights so that you go in with your eyes wide open. Number 2 is distributions. I mean, that's really important. I mean, what does the waterfall look like? What are the splits? What are the return hurdles, if there's any? Who gets paid first? Do the active operators get paid first? Do the passive investors get paid first? Is there a pref? I mean, things like that. You just have to know, the order of payments. I mean, who's getting what, when, and how much. The third, oh yeah, go ahead.
Real quick, can you explain what a waterfall is to somebody that's new to that term?
Yeah, I mean, it's called a waterfall because it's like, okay, so here's the cash flow at the top, and it spills over, and it spills over into different buckets, one bucket at a time. So let's say cash flow comes down, first bucket might be passive investors get a 6% pref return. So that's bucket number 1. And then it spills over into the next one, which would be, it might be a 70-30 split or anything like that. And it just kind of spills into, it's a waterfall that falls down bucket to bucket to bucket to who gets paid first.
So would this be a good way to describe it? I try to describe it to people as your preferred return as a limited investor, limited partner means this is what the general partners owe you before they can take any money from the investment beyond fees and things like that. And then a waterfall basically says they're going to participate in the upside with you. So if they give you their preferred return, they're going to split whatever's left over in that first bucket ties. And if they exceed another hurdle, then they're going to get incentivized more. And that's the second bucket. So a waterfall basically says, as the investment meets and exceeds returns, the general partners, the people that put together the investment, are going to get more incentivized along the way.
Right. Okay. Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, and it depends deal to deal. There may not be any hurdles. It may just be just one split. There might not be multiple splits.
Yeah. Okay. So we got capital calls and then distributions. What's the next?
The next one is fees. I mean, nobody likes to pay fees, but fees are what makes this thing work. I mean, if the sponsors / active investors are not getting paid, then they have no incentive to make the property succeed. I mean, they need to get paid. We need to get paid in order to have our hat in the bucket and make this thing work. So just know what those fees are. You have your acquisition fees, your asset management fees, construction management fees, capital event fees, like on a refi or the sale. And a couple things you might want to look out for that you might have to dig a little bit deeper, are property management fees. That might be in the operating agreement, it might not. And then you have to take into account whether or not, the property manager is actually that active sponsor as well, or if it's a third party that's doing it. Because if it's the active sponsor that's also doing the property management, maybe they'll like give you a huge property management fee that's built in there because they know they're going to collect that as well. So just something to look out for, and just know your fees, know who's getting paid what. And the best thing to do is to try to align your incentives. So if the deal does well, everybody gets paid. That's what you want to see. You want to see an alignment of interests. So, if the deal does well, everybody executes, then everybody gets paid and everybody makes their money. And that's really what you're looking out for and what you want to see.
Yeah, I think your description there of fees are what incentivizes everybody to put the deal together is probably the best description I've ever heard, because when you look at it and you're signing up, you're like, why are these guys taking so much of fee here, fee there, et cetera? But mostly general partners don't get paid until the end of a transaction if they don't have some sort of fee there. That could be 5, 7, 8, 10 years down the line. So to right. Find a property, to source a property, to go out there and meet investors, to put the structure, all that together, do due diligence, hire attorneys and all that, it costs a little bit of money. So any rules of thumb or guidance you see on some typical fees that you see out there that we should be looking for?
I mean, a lot of the fees you see nowadays are pretty run of the mill. I mean, you see a 2% acquisition fee, a 2% asset management fee. Construction fee can be a little bit higher if there is one at all. I mean, typically you won't even see that, but if you do, it might be kind of high. It might be like 5, 6%, something like that, other construction costs. You might see a 1% disposition fee or 1% refinance fee, and that's about it. But, the general rule of thumb is that, if the deal is smaller, those fees might be a little bit higher, because if it's $1 million deal and, the sponsors are only collecting that 1 or 2%, that's not that much compared to a $100 million deal where that 1 or 2% is a lot more. And typically it's about the same amount of work. You're still doing the same amount of work. So, the smaller the deal, typically the larger the percentage of fees, just because, the sponsors, again, have to make some money here so that they can keep, pushing this business plan forward.
Yep. Gotcha. All right. So capital call, distribution, sponsorship fees. What's next?
Liquidity. And this is pretty run of the mill because, these investments, when we're talking about syndications, should be looked at as illiquid. I mean, when you invest, you should understand and know that your money's going to be locked up for 3, 5, 7 years, however long, the property's being held. But you should know in your operating agreement where that provision is, because you might have a way to get out. Let's say there's a huge emergency. You need that $50,000, $100,000 out. And you want to sell to Uncle Ned or something. Well, instead of selling to Uncle Ned right off the bat, you might have to go to the sponsors and say, hey, I really need out of this deal. What can we do here? And usually there's going to be a right of first refusal built in, where either the other members, the other investors, or maybe the manager or even the company itself buys your shares back, and you might be able to get out of it. And then if nobody wants to buy it within, the members, the managers, the company, then maybe you can sell to Uncle Ned. But you just need to know your rights and know what you can do. But generally, just know upfront that these are illiquid. And that's the one big downside about these investments. I mean, you have consistent returns, you have big upside on the back end, but compared to, traditional stocks and bonds, they're illiquid. So that's the big thing with these.
Yep. We got Uncle Ned and burning couches. Boy, we got some West Virginia up in here. I love it.
There we go, man.
All right. What's the last one?
Last one is voting rights. Know your voting rights. Know what, what's up for vote, what's not. Know what if it is up for vote, what percentage? Is it a majority vote? Is it a super majority? Just know your rights. Again, these typically aren't going to be negotiable, but if you are coming in with a significant portion of the capital, these voting rights are usually the part of the operating agreement that can be negotiated. So if it's a smaller deal, like let's say it's $1 million deal and they're looking for $300,000, you're coming in with the full $300,000. At that point, maybe you should say, okay, let me look at that operating agreement. Let me see the voting rights, because I'm bringing in that full equity piece. I need to be able to vote on this, and this. For instance, maybe the manager isn't doing a good job for a certain amount of time. As that big limited partner, maybe you should have the right to vote them out and replace them with somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I think, key with whether you own stocks or whether you own shares in a syndication. Voting rights is your voice. It might be a small voice, but like you said, if you're bringing a significant amount of capital, you should be able to get a lot of it.
Definitely. Yep.
No, that's super helpful. I want to transition into kind of two more topics here since I've got you. One question that I get asked about a ton is to LLC or to not LLC. And I know you're not an attorney for anybody that's listening to this. And this is just your opinion, not the proper way to do it. Consult somebody, all the asterisks there. But what is your general thought on like to LLC or to not LLC?
Well, thanks for the disclaimer, so I don't have to say it. But in what regard? Do you mean with, owning a property, let's say directly, like a rental property, or do you mean going in as, let's say, a limited partner as a passive investor?
So good question. If you're a limited partner, you're buying a share as an LLC. So I'm going to assume that you're already LLC'd up there. But if I just own a duplex, full out, or have some debt on it, are there advantages to putting it in an LLC?
Yeah, of course. I'm an attorney, so I'm going to tell you to put it in LLC every time. I mean, if you can, if it's one property, a lot of times folks will just skip it and not do it, but you're definitely opening yourself up to some liability. I mean, if you have it in LLC, it protects you from lawsuits, protects you from screwing up financially. Usually you want to put it in two baskets if you can. If you get to a few different properties, you want to have, let's say in the simplest form, you have one LLC that holds the property and another LLC that quote unquote manages the property. So all the financial transactions will go in and out of one LLC, and then the other LLC will just kind of hold the property. So you've kind of separated your two liabilities there with respect to transactions and the money, and then also just the holding of the property where you might get sued by your tenant for a slip and fall or something like that.
That's really smart. I didn't think about that. That's really, really smart. And I know each state differs, but where do trusts play in all this? Like, cause I've heard some people hold it in trusts.
Yeah, I mean, you'll hear, and I do that too. I mean, you'll put them in land trust. The one thing with trusts, the big thing is you hear about, the acceleration clause in your mortgage, where if you transfer it from your individual name to an LLC, you might trigger that clause where they'll call it and just say, oh, you transferred, you should not have transferred title. Now you owe the entire loan. You do have that risk by transferring it directly to an LLC. Banks typically don't do that. They're not in the business of trying to do that. If you're paying your payments, they don't want to own the property, but they do probably have those rights in the mortgage documents. The way to override that is to transfer to a land trust where you are the beneficiary, and technically that is not a transfer, so they can't trigger that due on sale clause.
Interesting. All right. And then I want to throw out this question. I know you're not a CPA, but any tax advantages to LLC versus non-LLC?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, anytime you can layer different businesses on different businesses, it just opens your books up to that your CPA can kind of go in there and say, okay, well, get a business credit card, get a business debit card, start doing all your business expenses just to this account, and you can just start writing stuff off. I mean, there's just a tremendous amount of value you can get from a tax standpoint just by starting an LLC. And then when you start layering stuff on different things, I mean, you can just move all kinds of stuff around, and a creative real estate CPA can really help you out with, writing off those expenses and, coming out with a paper loss.
Yeah. If you have one of those, let me know, because mine is having a little difficulty right now with that. Let's just say,
gotcha.
As we're in tax season.
I've got a couple for you, man.
Yeah, there you go. All right. And then the last one is, I heard you recently talk about a deal you did in Winston-Salem. As a guy from Southwest Virginia, I know the Winston-Salem market pretty well because my dad used to own a business there, and it is a very hidden gem. Tell us about that deal. Why did you do it? What do you like about Winston-Salem? And then specifically, I want to get into the low income housing tax credit part of that deal. So first, tell us about the deal and how that went down.
Yeah, it's a 246 unit multifamily property, kind of typical value add, at least from that standpoint, but it's not, it's atypical in that it is a LIHTC project, meaning when the developers made the project, you receive certain tax credits to create this affordable housing, but in exchange for those tax credits, there's a contract, and it's typically 14 years, where your rent that you can charge is capped at a certain amount of the median income in the immediate area. So that, if you think about it, that caps how much your property can actually be worth, because you can only charge so much for rent. Now, when we go and look for a bunch of different, value add deals, we see LIHTC a lot of times, and we try to stay away from it because we know that there's those rental caps. So our upside is capped. If the LIHTC says you can only charge $800 a month for rent, and the market is demanding, $1,200, it doesn't matter. You can only charge $800 a month. So a lot of times you're pushing those caps at all times as the owner of those properties. But this particular property, if you dug down a little bit deeper, we were $400 to $450 a month below the LIHTC caps.
Wow.
So we were never going to hit that. I mean, even during our hold period, we're not going to hit that. That market's where we're at. It's just not going to support it. So those caps don't really mean anything to us. So a lot of people overlooked that property because they saw LIHTC and just said, we don't want to deal with that. We don't want to deal with those caps. But when you dug in and looked and to see exactly what they were charging now, because they hadn't raised the rents for so long, there's such a big delta that it didn't even matter.
Yeah, $400 to $500 is a lot of meat on the bone. I would say if I'm looking at a deal and there's $100 to $150 of rent growth, that seems like a decent sized deal to dig into further. So that's huge. What is the tax credit portion of that? Like what is the incentive? Does it vary by state? Does it vary by property? What was that?
Yeah, it varies by state, varies by property. I actually used to represent big banks whenever they gave out these types of loans. And typically it's just, it's a government incentive to build affordable housing because there's a massive affordable housing shortage in this country. So they give you these tax credit incentives to build these brand new buildings and just say, or renovate these buildings. And they'll give you tax credits. They'll give you, even the local governments will give you, some low interest or zero interest loans, things like that. There's a bunch of different government things you can do here just to incentivize you to build and renovate affordable housing, which is great at the beginning. But then towards the end, when the submarket around it comes up, and then you don't want it to be affordable housing anymore because you don't want those types of tenants in there anymore. Then you're kind of stuck with it for a while. But at the beginning, you get all these different incentives in order to build and renovate, to provide affordable housing for folks.
Yeah. Do you know Evan Holiday at all?
Yeah, I know the name.
Yeah, he's based in Nashville, and that's kind of an area where he focuses is on this obtainable, affordable housing. And he's super, super nice guy. If anybody ever gets a chance to meet him in the Nashville area or connect with him, super nice guy. But he was talking about on a podcast I was listening to where he will actually go get those tax incentives to develop and then sell them to a big bank to get the money to do the development. And it's just like, it's kind of matrix level thinking about how complex and how creative you can get in this industry, which is why I love it. It's because there's no cookie cutter way of doing real estate.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, I want to get into the last 5 questions we ask everyone here. And the first one is, what is your favorite book?
I mean, I don't want to just say Rich Dad Poor Dad, but man, that was the life-changing book for a lot of people. A new one that I liked, it's a little bit kind of rah-rah, but I like it a lot, is The Miracle Equation by Hal Elrod.
Yes.
Unwavering faith plus extraordinary effort equals miracles is the mantra in that book. And I love it. I mean, sometimes when things are tough, I think that myself, like, I'm just like, oh yeah, unwavering faith plus extraordinary effort. This thing is going to work out. Just keep moving forward. So I love that book.
Yeah. I'm assuming you've read The Miracle Morning as well.
Oh yeah, of course.
Do you have your own little morning routine that you follow?
Yeah, I do. It's kind of a weird one. I mean, I get up early. It's changed a lot lately because I used to get up at like 4:30, 5 o'clock, and I would get up and I would do 50 push-ups just to wake up, kind of just go do the bathroom stuff, go meditate for like 15 minutes, get my coffee, and then knock out the hardest thing on my plate for the day. I mean, that first hour, that first 2 hours, that's when your mind is fresh and ready to go. So I think that's the best time to knock out the hardest thing you have to do. But the way that's changed lately is that, I used to just get up at 4:30, 5 o'clock, no matter what. Now I set my clock based on getting 7 hours of sleep, because I think sleep is so important, and my schedule is a little bit more flexible now. So it's kind of like whenever I go to sleep, I set my alarm 7 hours from there to make sure that I get my sleep, because it's so important.
100% agree. The second question is, what's something you do every day?
Work out, man. Working out is the thing I do every day. I own a gym with my wife. It's a burn boot camp. I didn't used to do those types of workouts. I used to be kind of the typical guy and go to the gym and lift heavy weights and play with my phone in between the sets and that kind of stuff. But now I go to burn boot camp every single day. And, if I don't get my workout or some sort of, surf or just some sort of, an action going in the day, then I just don't feel mentally ready to keep moving forward. So it's super, super important to my success.
Yeah. Are you a good surfer?
No, terrible surfer, but I like it.
I'll tell you a
I
story.
picked it up too late, man, way too late. I mean, it's just like anything else. If you learn as a kid, you can be a pro, but if you learn when you're in your 30s, it's too late. You're not going to be great at it.
Yeah. I was out in Hawaii a couple of years ago, and I consider myself a decent athlete. And so when they offered me lessons, I was like, I got this. And you can't see it on Zoom, but I've got a nice little scar right underneath my eye right here where the surfboard just hit me right in the face.
Oh, wow.
And it was, I should have taken the lessons. We'll just leave it there.
Yeah.
What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
I would say get a mentor or coach. That's the biggest thing. That took me a while to get over that hump. I mean, when I was young, I was just kind of one of those people that just said, I'm going to take care of everything myself. I'm smart. I'm an individual. I'll figure it out. I'll do it. I didn't want to ask questions or ask anybody for help. But, as I got older, I realized that's the number one thing you can do to help yourself be successful, is to find somebody that's already doing what you want to do and mimic them. I mean, at the very least, mimic them. Taking it to another step, reach out to them, see if they'll take you under their wing. If you have to pay for it, that's fine. There's a ton of gurus out there that are either legit or are not legit. So make sure you do your research and make sure they're doing what they say they're doing. But there's nothing wrong with paying for a coach or mentor to teach you the ropes and to shortcut your success.
Yeah. And at the very end of the day, a good coach just holds you accountable to the goals you set. Right. And I made the investment this year into a coach, and it's really been helpful for me because every Saturday morning I'm sending him an accountability email that says, this is what I said I was going to do. This is what I did. Hold me accountable here. And we have our weekly call together. And it's been he's introduced me to a lot of people. It's been a very impactful part of my journey, I would say.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, accountability piece is huge. I mean, if you're working a full-time job, you need that accountability because, man, you're tired by the time that's over with, and you've got to get a little bit of extra push to kind of get you over the edge to do that extra work when you get home or before you wake up. And if you're an entrepreneur, you don't have a structure. So you kind of need that accountability just to keep you structured, because you don't have that W-2 structure anymore. So from either side of the table.
Yeah, there's definitely parts of me too that has not wanted to do things. And then I'm like, well, I got to send it in an email, so I better just go ahead and do it. So anybody that thinks they can do it without accountability, you're missing your full potential by not having somebody there that will hold you accountable.
Yep.
What is the thing you're most proud of in your life?
I would say walking my own path. I mean, I diverged from med school. Was probably the first one where it's just like, I know that that's not for me. Everybody's looking forward to the clinical part. I'm just thinking that's more stuff that I don't want to do. So, that was a big time for me to say, okay, I'm going to walk my own path. I'm going to do what I'm meant to do and how I want to do it, rather than just kind of follow along with life and, listen to what you're supposed to do and get a good job and work 9 to 5 till you're 65 and that sort of thing.
Yeah. The last one is, if you could sit down and eat a bowl of ice cream with anyone, who would it be and why?
Man, that's a tough one. I would say it's hard not to say like Jesus or somebody just prolific like that, right? Something insanely crazy. But I guess something a little bit more relatable. It would be great because I always loved him, was Kobe Bryant, somebody like that. Felt like he had so much more to give with his life, and he had kind of gotten over the "I'm too good for everybody" attitude and was starting to kind of turn a corner where he was helping people and changing lives, and then ended too soon. So that'd be somebody I'd like to sit down and have a conversation with.
Respect.
Yeah.
Well, this has been fantastic for me. I'd love to dig in more on the legal side of things. So we'll have to have you back on the show so I can ask some legal questions for myself. But if people wanted to
Absolutely,
reach
man.
out and find out more about you, where's the best place we could point them to?
Yeah, I mean, check out the podcast. Go to passiveincomeattorney.com. It has a lot of free materials and cool things on there. Another cool thing I got right now is go to intelligentpassiveinvestor.com and download the Cashflow calculator. If you're a passive investor or thinking about investing passively, you can actually, it's a spreadsheet you can plug in how much money you think you're going to invest passively over the next few years, and it'll kind of accumulate those returns and spit it out to you so you can actually visualize how you can start buying back your time piece by piece.
Love it. Love it. Seth, thanks so much for your time. We'll look forward to having you on again.
All right. Thanks, Matt.